Right, we're live there. Wow. Oh, you should write up an announcement.
Oh, I did not do that. You're
Yeah.
right.
So, we'll put us back behind the curtain until the announcement goes live.
Nobody will know any better. Okay.
We already have 2 viewers. I assume. It's just.
Okay. Announcement is up. Announcement is out.
All right. Back out from behind the blue curtain. Oh, let's Derv's talk about games. I'm your co-host, Mango.
And I am your co-host, Buddy. Hello. I'm paying attention and also ready to do this. I'm your co-host, Buddy.
And today we're going to talk a little bit about Humankind. But before we do that, Buddy, why don't you tell the folks know what it is we do on this podcast?
On this podcast, we like to talk about games, and Humankind is the new 4X game from God. What are they called? Amplify Media or something
Amplifier,
like that.
Andromeda, or something like that.
Yeah. So these are the guys. So if you are an average strategy gamer, you will know them from the series Endless Space and Endless Legend, right? These are the two.
Oh, these are the same people. I didn't realize
These
that.
are the same people. Yeah. So these are those guys. Endless Space is obviously a space-centered 4X game. Endless Legend is a sort of fantasy flavored 4X game.
Endless Dungeon is kind of like a
And
roguelite.
yeah. And Humankind is just Civ. It's just another. It's like if this released and it was Civ 7, I would not be surprised. I would be like, oh, Civ 7 is out. Look at this.
Yeah.
It's got all this
No,
civilization things.
honestly, if someone's, it's like, I'd say it's Civ 7, it's like, oh, Civ 7's out, and they stole these ideas from Endless Legend.
Yeah. And it's funny. We'll obviously going to talk about a lot of this stuff or whatever, but in a world where it feels like 4X games have made a lot of like strategy games in general, right, have changed a lot over time, right?
Right.
Where for a long time I sort of think Civ was the dominant form, right? And then it kind of evolved over the last couple of years, maybe I would say over the last 5 years or so, to be more paradox focused. I never see people talk about Civ games, but I see people talk about Stellaris games constantly, right? It's funny to go back to Civ, to have Civ be sort of like the game, I guess. That if you're looking for like a strategy experience, like that's where you're going to gravitate to. So, you know, here we are.
Yeah, and I'm curious about how much this reflects among the normies, as it were, because like the Paradox games, like Stellaris, I think blew up because Stellaris is, I think, pretty easily the most approachable of the Paradox games, and also like the most traditional styled, right? Like Crusader Kings and EU4, right? You're jumping into a point in history, right? And everything's already established. Whereas Stellaris, you're starting from like ground zero, right? I also think that like I don't know. Just thinking about it, right? Like, like you see this with the difference between Endless Space and like Stellaris and all this is like planetary based stuff doesn't have like the same terrain stuff, right? Like it's all abstracted
Yeah.
away to a certain extent. Whereas,
And I have to say I like that, right? Like it's very Star Wars, right? Where
yeah,
it's like, oh, this planet, it's the desert planet, right?
because that's
This
how
planet,
biomes work, right? But
yeah, exactly, right? Which is which is cool, which is
yeah,
fun. I like I don't want to shit on Stellaris. Stellaris is probably Total War Warhammer 2 would be my favorite, but Stellaris would probably be my second, right? For a long time, I would have said Europa Universalis, and I did for a long time. I went back to Europa Universalis, but after a while, their DLC packs I just found less and less interesting to go back to, especially because they kept rewriting these arcane archaic systems, right? Like it took me forever to figure out how to make money off of trade power, and I was so excited. And then literally they made one patch where they're like, we're changing trade power. And I was like, I'm out. Yeah, whatever, right? But Stellaris, I still go back to every once in a while, right? The new DLC comes back. I play a new version of the game. I also think Stellaris, just by the nature of it being a space game, has a lot more varieties of ways in which you can play. We'll talk about that in more detail a little bit later. But yeah, so it is interesting to be coming back so thoroughly to this very Civ formula, right?
right,
And I think I've characterized on the past that I think of it as like I think I outgrew it, right? Like I feel like when we talked about Civ 6, I was talking about how I had outgrown it as a strategy player. It's too simplistic for me, right? I wanted more crunch. I wanted more, equations and shit. Um and I guess I'm interested to say that Humankind legitimately grabbed me and I was in it. I was
yeah.
with it,
Oh
right?
yeah. So the
Um
the first night I played this, I one more turned myself till 2:30 a.m. So
oh yeah, me too. I did it till 5 a.m. Yeah.
yeah, no, I mean, the bad part for me was that the next morning there was a literal jackhammer outside of my window at 7 a.m. So
Oh my god.
yeah, but that's neither here
That
nor
sucks.
there. Yeah, um, but yeah, no, it really it grabbed me as well. Part of it, I think, might just be kind of like coming back to it, right? Because one of my I'm not gonna call it criticism because I haven't played this on any of the harder difficulties, but it was like
Sure.
very easy, right? I've relatively early gotten to like spam the end turn button until like win happens, right? Um,
Wow. Yeah, that's very different. We talked about this a little bit off cast. And I think that that's a really interesting note because it is also um I don't know. Civ, I get that feeling. And I find Civ games very easy. This game, I felt like I was crunching, and I legitimately lost. In my second game, I legitimately lost. I just straight up lost.
yeah,
And I was like, oh my God. This has never happened to me before.
what difficulty did you play your second game on?
Just the
Town?
regular difficulty. Yeah, I
Okay.
guess. What I must be set on that by its
That that
nature, right?
that is what it dumps you into. Um,
Okay.
and
Yeah, I mean and so I wonder, I just like wonder what like the contours of that might look like. The only other difficulty I know of is Quill 18 was playing on who is, a strategy guy. He's like the strategy YouTuber as far as I,
yeah, I think that's
can
fair.
think
Yeah,
of, right? And his first game he played on 10. He talked about how he plays Civ on Deity and he thinks Deity is too easy. He never loses on Deity, which to be fair, I sort of think I don't know that I want a Civ difficulty that where I lose, but um and he talked about how Town legitimately gave him a run for his money. And I think we'll dig into the specifics of why, I guess, in a bit.
yeah. This might be like a particular start type thing. And I've got some other comments too, but
Yeah, so
like
tell me all about your game.
yeah. So I started out on a continent with one other player, and I pretty quickly expanded, and I did SD for like the first two or three cultures that I went through, which I think maybe we should pause to talk about this. I think this is a really neat way to do the strategy game, right? Like you don't choose your culture from the outset and are locked into it for the whole game, right? Like you choose
Correct.
it as you go along. Every time you age up, you can either extend your age or boost or change civs to um
Yeah, so there are 7 different ages, and for each one you get a specific culture. And the first person to the age gets to choose, right? if somebody has already picked the Huns, you can't choose the Huns, for instance. Um, Interesting. Okay, so what was the first culture you went through?
Olmecs, uh,
Okay.
which
What's your
they have the Olmec heads, which like give you influence off of farms, or farmers' quarters.
interesting. Okay. Really interesting. Yeah, okay. My first one was Egypt. I went this is part of this is the kind of strategy player that I am. Like I almost always I see the little gears, I see production, and that's what I go for, right? In Civ you call it production. In this it's called industry.
Right.
In Stellaris it's also called something. It's almost always orange for some reason. I kind
Yeah.
of feel like it's legendary colors, right? Like it's the color scheme has now been ported from game to game to game, so it's sort of a
Yeah.
genre staple, right? Like,
Yeah. I think Civ set
yellow is
this.
gold.
Yeah, I think Civ set this initially, right? Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
blue
and
is science. Blue is always
yeah,
science.
blue is always
Um,
science, green is food, orange is
yeah,
production, purple is like social capital
yeah,
of some
purple.
sort.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's called influence in this. It's called influence in Stellaris. I don't know what it's called in Civ. Is it just called culture? I think it's just
It's
called
either
culture.
culture or diplomacy. Although culture might be slightly different because there is culture. You know, culture is purple, but I think they also have a secondary resource. I think that's like diplomacy points, which I think is also purple. I don't know.
Oh my god, you're right. And I think that is called influence,
Yeah,
actually. Anyway, so I almost always go for like the, just raw production, right? I just want to put mines and I want to put gears down on the map and have big gears and I want to complete all my buildings in 2 turns. I want to pump out 1 million military units or whatever. So my very first civ was the Egyptians, who are built for that because you can build the pyramids, and pyramids give you a bunch of
right.
they just give you a bunch of fucking
Yeah, I think the
industry.
Great Pyramids are also a wonder, which I also think is an interesting system.
Yeah,
Um,
okay, so the difference for wonders is when you get a certain amount of influence, which is purple points, right? Social kind of capital. You can buy a wonder off the list and you own it for life, right? And you can build it whenever you want and you never compete for wonders, which I think is huge, by the way.
yeah,
Like I was just thinking, I was like, how many times have I been like scooped at a wonder by like some other civilization, right? Or because I'm like going insane to maximize my production, how many times am I able to like scoop a wonder out from under another civilization? I see him building the pyramids and I'm like, oh, I can do that in 6 turns. Like, let's go. Like,
yeah. And part of it too is you can only lock one wonder at a time. But part of this is why I asked it is the culture, or the influence generating Civ level. And early like so later on you build things with, or you buy new territory with gold, but early on it's with influence, right? It's almost kind of like Crusader Kings 3, right? Like if you're playing tribal, you use prestige, and if you're feudal, you use gold. Um, but early on, it was like, oh, to take new territories, I need influence, and to upgrade, you know, outposts to cities, I need influence, and to capture wonders, I need influence. So I'm just gonna start like spinning up influence, right? And you can also use that to build to capture or to influence the neutral territories.
mhm.
Um, so yeah, so that's why I initially went with Olmecs. Also, I felt like I was like, oh, I can get culture off of farms. It's an improvement that for every adjacent farm you get an influence. It's like, you know, early on I'm probably gonna want to do farms to like get myself situated and like get enough food. But like I found like towards the end of the game, a lot of it was like keeping my food high enough that like my cities kept growing instead of like falling over themselves.
Yeah.
Um,
I
so
actually never had an issue with that on my end, but I think that part of that is because of how I ended up building my cities over time. Yeah, so the first thing that I did was I went Egypt, and I basically didn't run into a whole to another civilization until the next age, which I think is the classical age. And I can't remember. Oh, I think I picked Carthage as my no. The Aeneid Persians, maybe. There
so
was one that increased my city cap, and I was like, "That's what I want," because I had pretty quickly taken a couple of territories, and I didn't understand the attach mechanic at first. So I was like, each territory is going to become a city, right? So I just tried to like pump my city cap as much as I possibly could.
I do want to pause for a second because I do think that the opening to the game is very clever in that you start as like tribesmen, not
Yes, you
anything.
start in the Neolithic
Areas.
age, where you're running around as your tribe and you're like fighting animals and shit.
Yeah, and like you're walking over like food sources to like your people will eat enough food that they like spawn more units. I thought that was very cool. And then relatively quickly you go into the first like real era, but I thought that was a very cool way to start the game.
Yeah, it also should be noted that the way you progress the eras is not like in Civ, it is
The tech
based
trees.
on the tech tree. In this, it is based on what's called like fame or stars. So like as you progress along certain kind of avenues, right? Like population, number of districts, number of territories that you've claimed, number of enemy units that you've killed, right? Like you get these stars, and when you get a certain amount of stars, you progress into the next age.
Yeah, which is
But
slightly distinct from fame because fame are your victory points. Whoever has the most fame at
And
the end of
as
the
you do
game.
this stuff, you will gain fame,
And
which will then later serve as your victory points. And then anyway, um the very first star is different because it doesn't care about any of that stuff. It just cares if you have a big enough population, if you got enough science, and if you got you killed 7 wild animals, right? So it is like very built to this sort of nomadic horde lifestyle or whatever.
yeah, and something that's interesting is that you don't have to get every star, right? Like I did not have a fight until I was already in the first era, or like the first real era post Neolithic. So I just like ran over a bunch of food a bunch and spawned a bunch of units. Um, so yeah, I thought that was very cool. I actually stuck with the Olmecs through the second age.
Really?
Yeah. I'm not.
What for any particular reason?
I liked the Olmec heads, and I didn't particularly like any of the choices in the second age. At that point in time, um, I don't know if that's actually a smart thing to do, right? Like, cause like you get a bonus on your fame points. And I think early it might be okay. I, I did this. I think I kept all of my civilizations, for 2 ages apiece. Um,
Wow, that is crazy to me. I
yeah,
immediately switched because all of the civilizations have a passive bonus that you keep throughout the entirety of the game, right? Um, and I saw that and I was like, 10% fame is absolutely not worth whatever this passive bonus is. Like my first passive bonus was whatever the Egyptians get, which is something production related that I don't quite remember. Um, I think it might just be like plus industry on like stone or like rivers or something like that. But then my second one was plus city cap, right? It was this one that was plus city cap and also I think a little bit of stability or something like that, which also quickly became something I was very worried about. I was constantly hitting stability issues that I needed to like shore up all the time, right? And like and so I wanted to get those bonuses to carry them forward throughout every age. And I always really liked the bonuses that I got, which was crazy. Um, but I was building so much that I basically instantaneously got 3 stars in any era in the building districts part because I had honestly, kind of by the mid game, I had like 11 cities. No, I think I had 10 cities because I think I was 2 over the cap, and I think my cap was 8 at the time. And so I had 10 cities who were like either building infrastructure or districts half the time. So, if the era thing is like build 15 districts, that took me like 10 turns. Like I was immediately onto the first 3 stars of that
see,
in whatever I was doing.
this is interesting because I couldn't tell you exactly how I was doing it because like I basically got it so far ahead that I was like I stopped paying attention to like the minor mechanics. But like part of the reason why I stuck with my civilizations for 2 ages was I would age out before I was able to research the tech to build like their unique units. Like, well, I wanted to check out like the machine gun elephants, right?
So I do want to say you keep those units even if you head into a new
Right,
thing.
but
You
you
can still
can't
build
build
the
them
old people.
anymore.
Yeah, you can. Really?
Really? I thought you
I'm
couldn't.
pretty sure. I'm pretty sure I
Okay.
did. I
I
mean,
know.
I might be wrong. The thing that I was insanely behind on was science. I ended the game. I don't think anybody got into the contemporary era of
Oh
science. I think
yeah,
we were all doing like
same. Yeah.
it was like which to be honest feels like a like balancing
Yeah,
something.
I think that's got to be it. Like I was getting like in-game like events, like the civics events for um for global warming before I generated any pollution at all.
Really?
Yeah. And I was the
Wow.
only
Yeah.
one. I was the only one. Like I think by the end of the game, I might have been the only person producing pollution, right?
I
Just
was definitely not. But I was the Germans. And so in the modern era, which is the sixth era, it's not even the seventh era. I was the Germans, right? And the German unique unit is the U-boat. It's like the submarine. And I was like, okay, well, you know, like that's fine, whatever. I'm doing this for the production because the Germans are a factor. Like their unique thing was like just in an insane
A good
factory
factory,
that
yeah.
generates a million production or whatever. But I was like, yeah, sure, like I'll build some U-boats. The game ended before I researched the technology, which was in the Era 6 to build a U-boat. Like, I had just gotten the coal, which would have been needed to build to research that, you know, to research, like, that technology. Though I will say that I was incredibly behind on science the entire time. In Civ, I have always found that passive science like science you can be passive about and keep up. That did not seem to be the case here. It seemed like if I was ignoring science, which I essentially was, you're fucked.
Yeah,
You can't progress at all.
I think part of that. So part of that, I think, is that like, because I was, I have played enough. Say so back in college, a friend or one of our mutual friends, Danny, was very into to Civ 4, and we used to play a multiplayer game, and he was like hardcore about optimizing. So I learned a lot of tricks from him, right? And so I'm like looking over my production and whatever and whatnot. But like when you go to build a science quarter, there's just places that don't seem as good as building like a workshop or a farm, right? Like the workshop tiles and the farm tiles are always like, here's 30 production, and science is like if you get 10, right? So and maybe that balances out in a bit, like maybe like the numbers are just a little bit different, but I always was looking at it's like, well, why wouldn't I build a farm? Why wouldn't I build a workshop?
Yeah, so what I figured out late game when I realized this problem, maybe it was like turn 200 or something, right? I realized that this is a problem, and the funny part, I was in a war at the time, where the enemy had upgraded from pikemen to halberdiers, and I was still on pikemen, and I had these jaguar warriors because I was Aztecs, which by the way, fucking Aztecs are broken. They are the grossest like medieval civ. Holy shit. I had these jaguar warriors from the Aztecs that fight at full strength even when they're damaged, and I had so much raw production that I basically just threw legions of jaguar warriors at their halberdiers and I won. Like I won this war, but I was like, I can't have this happen again, right? Like that's a huge problem. So what I realized is the research quarters benefit from synergy way more than any of the other quarters benefit from synergy, right? And I feel like what it wants you to do is to take one city and like specialize in research, which is kind of what I ended up doing. I took that city and I made a 7 hex, which was one research quarter surrounded by 6 more research quarters, and that city was half my research for basically the rest of the game.
I
Because I
bet you what it wants you to do is like towards the end of the game I had like some northern Arctic zone that was like an island with nothing on it. It's like go put all your research there because you're not gonna get anything good out of it anyway, right? Like
yeah. Yeah.
uh but yeah, that makes sense now that you say it, right? Like
But even then, you know, like even then, and I caught up in research to everybody else, and I was kind of on par or whatever. But I was never able to like break into the upper echelon,
yeah,
which was
maybe that's
weird.
like a game time thing. Like it feels like like there's just slightly there was the balance is slightly off. I do think this was in early access, so I think that like and there's a little bit of roughness around the edges you can see in places. Like I encountered a couple of like minor like interface bugs or whatnot.
Yeah, I encountered a lot of like weird interface shit that was like you tell a unit to do a thing and it doesn't do it right or whatever.
Yeah, yeah. Um, but like it's definitely not as polished as say Civilization is, right?
Yeah.
Which all of Firaxis and Sid Meier behind it.
But
Uh,
I do want to like come back to this thought of so the thing that I got out of the Aztecs was +2 land movement speed for all of my units, which basically turns all of your infantry into cavalry because they're just like running around. And it's a militaristic civ, right? Which wants you to get into fights, you know, like military civs. Oh, and also I had built the Forbidden Palace at that point, which increases your war when a ward gets declared, you immediately get +25 war score wherever your war score is. So as a militaristic civ, which starts your war score at 80, I immediately start, no matter where I'm at 100% war score, which was just like, okay, I'm just gonna like fight guys constantly. Um, and The process of fighting reminded me, like, this is maybe the most that the game has felt like Endless Space or Endless Legend, really Endless Legend, right? Which was a feature I fucking hated in Endless Legend, really turned me off to the game. And I put maybe like 10 or 15 hours in and immediately like dipped, right? But in this version, I was so with it. I thought it was so much fun. Which is these sort of
On map.
on map battles, yeah, where you get an army, you get a bunch of units, clump them all together in an army. Your army hits another army and it designates a portion of the continent as a battlefield for the next couple of turns, right? Where your units get deployed and you can move around mountains and everything like that. And it was incredibly like complex and strategic in a way that I have not felt in a Civ game in a long time.
Yeah, no, and, post Civ 4, they don't allow you to death stack anymore. But like, I agree, right? Like, they put like caps on the number of units you can stack, and that influences like how big a battle that can play out. Unfortunately, I didn't have a ton of opportunity to fight. Like no one,
Yeah, because you were only with one other guy, right?
and they were like super subservient to me, and I was like, I never had a war, like at all.
Really? Okay, I was constantly fighting.
Okay,
Well, because, so
I'm
what happened? Did you, like, declare territory near them or whatever?
I did, but like they were already behind me enough that they didn't have problems, and I kept to my continent with the other guys. By the end of the game, I don't think anybody else had any like ships, right? Like no one was like even like trying to challenge me
Huh.
in terms like the only person that could have was the person on my continent, and they were like enamored with me. Like I was like I had culturally dominated them so much. Like occasionally someone would be like, "You're oppressing my people." I'd be like, "Give me that territory." And they were like, "Okay, here, have it." and
Wow, I had a very opposite experience. The 2 guys on my civilization or on my continent fucking hated me the whole time and constantly fought me. Anytime I did anything on the border, right? Like you pop an outpost and they're like, "Give me that outpost." And I'm like, "No." And then they declare war. And you're just like, "Well, fuck, okay, I guess." And the first war I did really poorly, actually. I lost territory, but I ended up winning the war just by sticking it out. Part of the thing is that my continent is it kind of reminds me of like the Texas to Florida. It's Florida, like the Gulf Belt, right?
right.
Where my capital was at the very bottom, think like Miami, right? And these two civilizations were both packed in Texas, right? So I kind of had the whole of like Florida, the Panhandle. I had up to maybe like Louisiana, right? That was just all my territory. So they had no way to ever disrupt my production centers, and I could just constantly fart units onto the front line, so it didn't really matter how many things I like lost or whatever. But we were just fighting all the time, and it eventually got to a point where we were ping-ponging, where I was at war with the top empire, and then I would get peace with them, and then I would go to war with the bottom empire, and we would just go back and forth until I drove them both off the continent. I took over everything.
Yeah, so I feel like I got into like this is like another classic Civ thing where it's like I'm producing like single digit numbers of units ever just because, and it wasn't quite that bad, but it's like I don't really need to pop units, and if I think something's scary, I will just go and throw in like 4 units and buy them out because I have like ungodly amounts of gold, right? Like I'll rush
Sure.
production, and like I'm like I have guns and they still have pikemen, so uh,
Man, that's really interesting. Yeah, I kind of fucked myself initially because I went very hard on the way I won that first war was mounted units, where I lost the territories, but that counts against you, but it doesn't really hurt that bad, right? The thing that really hurts is taking a city. If one of your city gets taken, it's -4 war score per turn. So you're on a ticking clock at that point, right? Um, but they ransacked my outposts, which destroys them, and like they took them over or whatever. But that's like a one-time hit of a couple of war score, which was not a big deal. But because I was Egypt, I had these chariots. My archers were chariot archers, actually, was specifically what it was. So I went like a million chariot archers, and I eventually just beat them by outproducing them with chariot archers, right? But then I kind of fucked myself because then I had all these chariot archers and I was like, oh, it's the new age. Let's upgrade these into, whatever. You upgrade them into like horsemen of some variety, some kind of cavalry thing, right? But there were so many, but by this point, they had turned a lot of their territories into cities. I had reconquered the territories that were initially taken from me and turned those into cities. And all of those cities were building up palisades and building up stone walls all around them, right? And cavalry can't scale a wall, right? Like you can't move through a palisade. So my army was almost entirely cavalry, and anytime I would get in a fight, I couldn't fucking do anything because these cities were so close to each other that it was just like wall to wall combat. And I mean that literally, like going from one wall to another wall is like, the state of combat or whatever. And I eventually just had to like completely overhaul my army to be these Jaguar warriors and win wars by spamming Jaguar warriors, I guess.
Super interesting. I'm thinking about this. And I'm trying to figure out like maybe there was some inflection point that I'm missing. So in terms of like why I was able to get so far ahead, first thing I want to point out is that we talked about this a little bit off cast, but something I learned from my Civ 4 days is the importance of chopping, as we called it, which is like cutting down forests to boost production. And because you don't have to build workers in this game, which I think is neat. Like my warriors and scouts, I was just like go chop wood when like there was nothing better for them to do, right? And so
Sure.
like they would knock down a forest and get a bunch of bonus production. So I think that might have helped. The other thing that happened, which was interesting, is like in the fog, one of these independent civilizations popped up. Like these they're like nation state equivalents from Civ. And like I was like, I don't want this one here. It's annoying. And so I was like, I'll go fight it. And I went and like I sent an army, like I sent an army to attack it, and it just converted, right? Like there was like nothing around, so I just like instant took it. So maybe like that was like just a free city that boosted me up.
Yeah, normally you have to compete for those. I never
No,
had
but
the
I
problem
like
in my
took it by force, right? Like I literally walked a unit on top of it, and there was no resistance.
Wait, really?
Yeah, like they
That's
were
how
just
that works?
um. I think maybe a little bit later they'll build their own defenses, but there was just like I guess I had caught it so early that they didn't have any units. And I just literally like walked on top of it. I was like, "Yeah, this is yours now." I was like, "Wait, no, that's not what
This
I
really
wanted."
frustrates me. So this didn't happen in my first game. In my first game, I just didn't have any of these cities. Or actually, I think there was one on the sort of Texas side of my continent, but it got conquered pretty early by one of the other civilizations. So it just like was another city that we fought over or whatever. But in my second game, there are a bunch of these. Which uniquely, my second game I did a little on the longer turn pace of Endless, and my second game I also did huge, a bigger world, right? um and so it seems that there have just been more cities that have spawned in that game just because there's more free space, basically. That's the game that, by the way, that I lost, which was because I made one good army, and I thought it would be enough to protect me from my warlike neighbors to the south, and they came with two moderately powerful armies, and they killed them and they beat me. They just won. They just straight up won. And I was like, oh fuck, I don't have anything. And they took my first city and they walked to my capital, and I save scummed the 10 turns before the war had started or whatever. But anyway, so the thing that I was doing there was I was competing with people, right? Like there's like an influence bar,
Right,
and you can pay influence, you can pay money to increase kind of your per turn like
influence rate.
progression.
Yeah,
Yeah. And at the max you can spend a certain amount of influence, to add the city, to assimilate the city into your civilization. I spent a ton of influence on that. I could have just walked an army on top of it. What the fuck? This is bullshit.
yeah. No, I mean part of this too is like I was doing that with like so there was one at the very top, and there was one that like spawned in the middle while I wasn't looking. Like I think this game does funky stuff with like fog of war, right? Like things will happen in the fog of war if you're not looking at it. Um, And so like that one was like, well, this is inconvenient. And I went and I took it. It was like, okay, how do I deconvert this to an outpost? And it's like you can't do that. You have to like you can only do that in like the medieval. There's like a tech you can buy in the medieval era that'll do it. Like, well, fuck, right? So I had like gotten full influence on the other one, which was a cod. Um, I only remember this because of Sargon. But
Oh, and actually the one that I was on my content was Sargon, or I'm sorry, was Akkad, because we traded that city back and forth. I thought that was the case. I was like, where did this name Akkad come from?
I mean,
So
it's a
yes.
real place, right? Like,
Well, no, yeah, sure. I just mean like what culture
oh,
had. like because there was no maybe there were like Babel. I was like, maybe were they the Babylonians? They're like, I don't know. Did I miss something? But
No,
yeah.
in my game, it spawned as an independent city. So
So I think that is the case. I think it was a COD, the
yeah.
independent city state.
So I did it that way, and they had a bunch of units. So I think if I had tried to walk in on them, they might have like put up a fight. Like I'm
Mm.
convinced with this other city, which is sus, which made me laugh the entire game, because the city was pretty sus. But I'm pretty convinced that I just like happened to hit it at the right time where it hadn't spawned any units yet, and so I was able to prance on over it. Um, but with a COD, I was like, oh, okay, now I've got the influence there. I'll just buy it, and I went and I bought it, and it was immediately like minus 120 influence. I was like,
Yeah.
this was like before like I had gotten like that was like negative for me. It was like, well, I can't do this anymore. So I released it and it was independent again. Something interesting to learn there is that basically got me all of their units, right? Like
Oh, you bought
well,
them and
I,
then liberated them, but you keep their
the
units.
units, yeah.
Oh
So
my god, that's interesting.
yeah, so that's
That's clever.
I didn't do it on purpose, but for the future, it's like, well, if I need units, right, like go like clobber a city state, like you already have to have the influence going, right? Because you can't do it instantly, which I think is smart, right? But
Yep.
like I've got the influence going, you can just like buy it and release it and have like half an army ready to go. So
Oh
that was
yeah,
neat.
see, I pretty quickly walked into that 120 influence penalty, but I stayed there for a while. I was just like, I to me, having a city was more valuable than that much influence per turn or whatever. Because like, I think that was maybe it was 20% of my influence. I was making like 600 influence per turn, and I was like, 120 is like not that bad. I'm willing to pay a 20%
Oh,
tax
I,
just to have another fucking city churning out Jaguar warriors.
I feel like if I was there, I would have been fine. But I was like at like not nearly that. Like I was at like 80, and that would seem pretty hot.
Yeah,
Like
see, part of it is I don't quite understand how influence gets created in the first place. And I was like, I'm pretty sure I just get influence by having good cities. So I'll just make up that like that one city sort of buys itself in a way, right? Like because it is contributing some amount of influence to the influence cap. And I was just like, I'm just gonna assume that it's good enough that it's not a big deal. It also might have been some like, like esoteric interaction that I wasn't keeping track of. So, for instance, in my second game, I specifically didn't go. I wanted to try a different route, obviously. So I was like, I'm not going to choose any of the guys that I chose the first time around. And I was like, and so I chose the Chinese because the Chinese have a crazy good uh emblematic district called the Confucian School, which when you place it near mountains gives you research and it is just a bunch of stability. I was like, holy shit, this is huge. Because the big thing in my first game was I kept running into all these fucking stability problems because I was building too quickly.
see,
Right?
I
Like
don't know
when
how, but I never had stability problems, like
really, did you
at
get to
all.
commons? I think
Uh,
that might be part of why I was like struggling because
huh.
commons is like the district that gives you stability for each adjacent district.
I rarely I needed to build that like once. Most of the time, I was just fine.
Real? Did you just like live at like 30% stability? How did you build all these
No,
districts?
I never had a problem. Maybe it defaulted me to an easier difficulty than I thought, but um like it was like close to 100 most of the time, and every time I had a problem, I went and I built a piece of infrastructure that boosted it. Um,
Wow, this is crazy to me. Every district is 10 stability, minus 10 stability.
yeah, I mean, I don't
I
know,
wonder if
like
it's one of the civs that you like had some
no,
stability.
I'm looking at the Olmecs just to see what their yeah no two two you know cultural proximity is always maxed out. Uh, yeah, and plus one influence. um, yeah.
Wow.
Oh, no, the district wasn't that great either. Yeah. Let me see if it's another one. Yeah, you talk about something while I look up. I think.
Okay, I'm just very interested in this. I did eventually make it to the contemporary era, where I picked, funnily enough, the Soviets, which typically happens in these games because normally what happens with the Soviets is they give you just like a huge production boost, right? In most Civ games, if there's any kind of Soviet, if there's any kind of like the Soviet government or culture to choose, you just get insane bonuses to corruption, and that's or to production, and so that's what I did. But it was also very warlike, and at this point, I was trying to defeat my to take over the entire continent. I wanted to kill off the two other civilizations, and they have this insanely good emblematic district, which is called the Arms Factory. That like it is a ton of production, and it creates a unique strategic resource on the map called weapons, and harvests those weapons to reduce your stability by 20 in every city you have, but also make every combat unit you pump out like +3 combat strength. So I was like shitting out these like not only was I shitting out high level, right, like arquebusiers or whatever, right, like whatever the strong unit was at the time, I was doing it with plus a bunch of extra combat strength. Especially because at this point I had finally figured out attachments, and you can build two attachments you can build two arms things in one city, and you get +6. And I was just like, this is this is insanely broken. And so that was where I ended my game. Did you end the game on one of the contemporary civilizations?
So I had evolved the Siamese. I think I might have frozen the stream because I was trying to check on my game while we were talking, but hopefully I fixed it now. I abandoned that course of action. Um, but yeah, no, I ended on the Siamese evolved once. Because I think they were the floating market people. And I like the
Yeah,
floating
yeah, yeah,
market.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Because I went aesthete to aesthete, then to builder because I think maybe I only did one builder because I did Olmecs, and then Franks to Franks, and then Siamese to Siamese. I think that's it. Maybe
That's would have been 6. You would have chosen another one in there. There's 7, right?
yeah, maybe I feel like I picked another builder in the middle somewhere, but I can't
Hold on, wait,
remember.
maybe it is 6. Let me think. I did Egyptians to Persians to Aztecs to Poles to Germans to Soviets. That's 6.
Yeah,
So maybe it is
is
just
there like
6.
um a future level that just like didn't like that like we managed not to see because we blitzed through the game too much?
I mean, I definitely didn't get into any of the like there was like air units stuff
Yeah,
in there, and I like completely skipped over anything like that.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um I remember I went was it 6? I went Polish because the Poles. Wait, okay, so sorry. There's the Neolithic era, the Ancient era, the Classical era, the Medieval era, the Early Modern age, the Industrial age, the Contemporary age. That's 7, but oh, Neolithic. So you
Yeah,
choose 6.
yeah, yeah. That makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Right, because the last one is Americans, Australians, Brazilians, Chinese, Egyptians, Indians, Japanese, Soviets, Swedes, and Turks.
Yeah,
Interesting.
interestingly, all of those I didn't find in any of those. I don't think there's a militant one because at that point I was like, well, I'm just going to go militant. So part of my game was I was really behind on stars almost the entire game
Hmm.
because there was another culture on another continent that was doing shit, and I was so behind in science that I couldn't sail anything over there because I just didn't have, the open waters caravels or whatever. And I kept getting these notifications that they were increasing their fame. Because there's a bunch of stuff that you compete for, right? Like natural wonders. Like if you're the first person to discover a natural wonder, you get a bunch of fame for that or whatever. And I just don't think I think there were 0 natural wonders on my continent. I think all of the natural wonders spawned on their continent and they got to every single one first. And I was just like so far behind. And the only way that I won the game is I blitzed all of the wonders like back to back to back in the space of 30 turns because I would claim a wonder. I would set all this is the other nice thing is that you have the shared project, so I can set all of my cities onto the wonder, and I completed it in like 5 turns, and then I just did that with another one, and I farm, and each one of those wonders is like 100 or 150 stars or something, it's a certain amount of stars, and I just farmed the stars that way,
The
and that
fame, not
got me ahead.
stars.
Oh, the fame, yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah.
I farmed the fame that way, and that got me ahead.
There's
Uh,
also a wonder that like increases production on shared projects.
Yep,
Uh,
I got that one. In the early game I didn't have good wonders. I think I built Stonehenge, but I was literally the last person to choose a wonder, I think. And I think
okay,
that was because I think I had 3 cities when my city cap was 2 at that point.
I see.
Which
That
is
makes
part of the
sense.
problem because I was that was like an early game influence strain. And then but then by the mid game I was picking up wonders pretty normally. I just didn't really love any of these wonders, to be honest. Like there was generally like one really good wonder that I was like, oh, this one's amazing. This is the one I want. Um, and then a couple of one that I was like, whatever, right? Like I think I did Notre Dame just because I was like, why not? I
Yeah.
guess yeah, like might as well. I didn't do anything with religion. Did you do anything with religion?
So I pumped up my religion, but I very quickly like secularized. So like it didn't matter. Um, like I hit the decision point. It's like how do you want to secularize? And I was like it's not even like you get a choice, right? It's like
You get state atheism or you get
yeah,
secular.
yeah, secularism, right? It looks like I had two locked civics options. I suspect if you're like very high on tradition, you'll get more religion options than because like it was pretty opaque how like your civics bars affected your affected how the
Oh,
game
that's
worked.
interesting. You only had do you mean of the whole civics tree, you only had 2 that were locked?
So on the specifically on the religion tree, I had more that were locked other places, but on the religion tree, right,
Okay.
I had like 3 religion pips that became obsolete when I secularized, but there were 2 that were locked, and I assume that those are like if you don't secularize and if you go to religion, which might be if you had high tradition on those bars. That's my guess. I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
okay. I paid very little attention to those, and I unlocked very few of them, I felt like. Um, I mean,
It's
maybe I unlocked a normal amount,
yeah,
or whatever. It just like most of those trees were gray, and I didn't
yeah.
visit them, right?
No, I
Um,
agree. I only picked them up when they showed up, but I also like I know I made more of my choices based on like kind of like a personal ideological choices for that first game than I did on based on any sort of strategy.
oh, I all of my choices were based on immediate anytime I saw a thing, I saw the little icon. It was like, "This will move you one step that way or one step this way." I couldn't care less about that, right? I just wanted the effect, right? So if the effect was plus 10 gold per turn, I took the gold, baby. Like, like I didn't give a shit about any of the direct. So I didn't even know where I ended up on all of that stuff.
Uh,
I vaguely knew that there were some that I wanted. There was one that increases your industry by 10%. And I was like, oh, I want that one. And that was it.
yeah, no, I like the individual civics. Um, I like didn't visit again once I picked one, but like the decisions, I like okay because the decisions were much shorter term, right? Like I would occasionally make like a concession to the gameplay. It'd be like this will do bad things if you are like if you do like the bad thing, right? I was like,
Oh
that's
yeah,
gonna,
see, I never took any of those either.
or it's like it's like the consequences like potentially could spawn another problem, right? Like, um, but like most of those kind of like moved in a direction that I didn't like anyway. It was like I don't know, like the game seems to like have a particular point of view, which is kind of like vaguely like European like sensibilities, right? Like, um,
Yeah, it seems I remember thinking about this when Civ 6 came out because Civ 6 when did Civ 6 come out? It came out like not that recently, but
yeah,
in the 2010s, right? Um because I just feel like, yeah, it came out in 2016. This is why I was thinking about it. It came out in 2016, a month before the 2016 election. And I remember at the time playing it, and I was like, how the fuck have we dodged like the political undertones of Civ for like like our whole career, you know what I mean?
yeah.
Like, how have there not been like a bunch of think pieces? Honestly, maybe there have been a bunch of think pieces about how like, oh, it's racist that Civ says,
Gandhi likes news.
yeah, whatever, right? Like, I
Yeah,
for a game so explicitly about politics,
yeah.
to essentially not be about politics
Well,
and
I
to have this kind of just like, yay, we like
so Civ in
everybody.
particular is pretty anodyne about it, right? Like it's like if you go this way, you get more production, and if you go this way, you get more wealth. So both are equally valid, right? Like that's kind
Yeah,
of like
that's true. Yeah. It
um
really does not take sides. That's fair.
and it kind of like tries to avoid like it's not like you know fascist Germany is like an option in most Civ games, right? Like it's
No,
always
wait, it is. Fascism is a little the end game ideology trees, right? You have it is democracy. I don't want to say democracy, communism, fascism. It might be democracy, socialism, fascism. And fascism is where you go if you want to do military stuff. Democracy is where you go if you want to make money. And communism is where you go if you want to like do insane production. I'm pretty sure this is a thing. Hold on, I got
okay.
it.
I haven't played a ton of Civ 6, so maybe I'm forgetting, right? Because like that's like it wasn't that way in like the earlier games, right? There just wasn't that kind of like diversity of right, like because like the games like the early games or the early ages had slavery, but you kind of aged out of them pretty quickly, right? And same thing in this game, right? Like slavery at
Oh,
some point,
this might have been a Civ 6 thing.
yeah. But to that point in particular, right? Like the point I'm making about like it's like the global warming event comes up, and the options are like study, which is like the vaguely like the vaguely democratic option, or like restrict, which is like the communal option, or like ignore it, and it says in letters it's like might lead to negative consequences later, and like moves you towards tradition. It's like, okay, right, like which one are you
Okay,
picking?
so just taking a look at this. So it is a Civ 5 thing that I'm thinking
Okay,
of. And it is named Freedom, Order, and Autocracy, where
okay.
freedom is America, order is
Mm.
communism, and autocracy is fascism,
Well,
right?
okay, yeah,
And it
yeah.
was like an end game tree to sink all your culture
Right. I mean,
into or whatever.
autocracy doesn't necessarily imply fascism, but like that's like
Yeah.
that's like
Yeah, but the order tree is pretty funny. The order tree is hero of the people, socialist realism, right? Like, 5-year plan,
yeah,
Iron Curtain, right? Like, one side is oh
yeah. I think part of what it hides behind too is like a lot of this has like '90s era sensibility in terms of like what
oh
the
yeah, like
politics
history
are.
is over, the
Yeah,
end of history. Yeah,
right. But like
yeah.
like Iron Curtain is not like like Xi Jinping steers the ship of state, right? Like it's like oh Russia, Soviet Union fell, right? Like we don't have to worry about that because that's like last era's
Yeah,
politics, right? Um,
yeah. The autocracy tree has such non-political options as lightning warfare and police state. Like,
okay, yeah, yeah. No,
oh god.
but like I don't know. I feel like there's kind of like like even like we're talking about with this one. There's like an implied point of view where it's like you're choosing like it's like how like Hearts of Iron 3. The tutorial has you like kind of like winks and nudges you as like you're playing as Hitler, but they don't ever outright say it, right? Like, um, and they just kind of like let it ride and don't care about it too much, which is maybe
Yeah,
how we avoid this problem.
I do think that Humankind sort of runs into a strategy game problem that I have, which is how much fun it is to play off spec in a way. Like off that's spec is the wrong word. But just like kind of like how much fun is it to walk away from what you would normally play and play something else? So I think Stellaris and Total War are amazing at this. And other games are not, right? Europa Universalis, as much as I love that game, I was rarely interested in playing a different Civ, nation or whatever, than one of like the core fun nations that already sort of like fit my playstyle, right? Spain was my favorite because Spain does colonization, but I did a Spain run, I did a Burgundy run, I did a France run, I did an England run, and then I played the Ottomans who don't do any kind of colonization, and I fucking hated it. I was like, this sucks. This is no fun at all. And then I played the Chinese, and I was like, oh, this is actually kind of fun. No, and I fucking hate this. This fucking sucks, right? Like, it's just like at a certain point, in Stellaris, I've done runs in Stellaris that are insanely peaceful, scientific, whatever. And I've also done like warmongering. And I've even done like different versions. Like you will sometimes go like the technological warfare run where like you're building incredibly like powerful and scientifically incredible fleets or whatever, right? And then sometimes I would go these like really kind of barbaric runs where I really wasn't doing much in terms of science, but I was like constantly at war with everybody, and I was using raiding, like the raiding stance to like steal pops all over the place, and I was selling them for a bunch of money and stuff like that, right? Like, and even that kind of gives me these contours. It gives these contours to the strategy of my play, right? In the same way that the Beastmen are a horde army in Total War Warhammer 2, right? That are encouraging me to like sack and raid and pillage, right? They're this like evil army that are encouraging me to do this. And the Dark Elves are also sort of an evil army that are encouraging me to sack and raid and pillage. But like the contours are so much different because for the Beastmen, it's my entire economy. For the Dark Elves, it is the fundamental pillar of creating my own economy, because as the dark elves you're taking slaves, so like you're not sacking guys in order to get a big boost of 600,000, you don't get 60,000 gold from destroying Altdorf. That's what happens if you're the Beastman, right? You sack Altdorf, you get a bunch of money. This fuels you for a couple of turns until you can sack another place, right? With the Dark Elves, you sack a place, you don't really get that much money out of it, but you do ship slaves back to your house, and now your per turn gold is going way up. And so they're both sort of encouraging the same kind of gameplay, but with different sort of like goals or whatever. And I'm very well tuned to those in Stellaris and in Total War. And I just feel like Humankind lacks that. I feel like if I had not gone this like builder militarism route, I would have just fucking hated it the whole time. Which is maybe why I do kind of crapped out instead of one more turning myself into oblivion on this like China run, right? Like, I mean, I don't know. Maybe it was just like I immediately lost that war and that fucking sucked and was hilarious, right? But I just save scummed and built more units beforehand and then won the war this time, right? And even then, like, I don't know. There's just something about playing, just like something about playing a a civ that takes forever to build a district that makes me sad.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because like I feel like the issue with, I don't know if it's an issue particularly with Humankind, but with the way that the game, like you always want production, but like maybe you don't always want to maximize production. If that's the difference. And I think if you like ideally you're doing a little bit of everything, but like it's hard. Like you will always be building workshop quarters regardless of who you're playing. And we
Yeah,
talked about like that's like I guess like works a little bit more fundamental in food. Like you don't need to play agrarian to want to build food, right? Like um I think maybe that's what the issue is here. Is like it feels like if you're playing builder, that like anything else is just like not gonna feel right. But I like even when I wasn't playing builder, I still had pretty high production speeds. I wonder what the thing is here, because like similar to your point, I get what you're saying, and I haven't done it as much with Stellaris, but like with Crusader Kings, sometimes you're just kind of at the mercy of who your heir is, right? Like sometimes you get one
yeah.
that's like, well, he happened to be militaristic, and so I have to abandon my steward style, like which is what I um, typically prefer to play, and you can go and have fun and have fun with that in terms of like the adaptability thing that you were talking about. Um, and I change styles partway through my game, which I think is a really neat thing, right? Like is that you can abandon whatever particular mode you're playing for and switch it up midway through the game, which I think is fun and neat. Um, but I don't like. I feel like part of it is maybe that just like once you're in the game, you really have to be making those choices strategically rather than like style wise, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Like,
I
like
think something that would have been interesting to do would have been a world where I wasn't incentivized to like constantly flood myself with these maker, because like the maker districts have that adjacency bonus. And
right.
as soon as I
I think
realized
all of
this, I
them
was
do.
like, yeah, all of them do. And it kind of, and that's part of what like building that research core did for me, right? Like, is I blocked off 7 whole tiles where I just said all I'm doing is I'm making a bunch of research cores, and it's going to be, and this whole city is research core and food basically, right? um but I sort of wonder what a version of this game would have looked like if instead of getting similar bonuses, you got cross bonuses. So like a maker's quarter next to a farmer's quarter would get an extra food and would get an extra like gear or whatever, so that I was more incentivized to diversify, because I think in a certain sense I almost like over optimized myself, right? Like I basically solved every problem in the game with raw production, right? Even if I was scientifically behind, even if I was whatever behind, I was just able to, I had 12 cities pumping out 800 gears. It was gonna be fine no matter what, right? There was just like no way that I could sort of like lose from that position. And I felt in past civilization games that you can kind of like, um, I don't know. It's more generalized, right? Because of the way that you can't specialize as much or as
Yeah, yeah,
hard in the individual like cities, because like in those games it's almost always about like the improvements, right? Like you build a farm on the grassland, you build a mine on the hills, whatever, right? Um and I just sort of wonder if having that much control over what like the different districts look like um kind of changes the just like changes like the makeup of the map. I also think something in Civilization that's happened to me. In Civilization, I almost always went for like these builder kind of civs. I think my favorite in Civ 5 was the Egyptians, for instance, maybe in Civ 6 too. The Egyptians tend to be my favorite, I guess, in terms of just like raw building shit. Like building cool shit, the culture, right? Um, but something that I did in Civ 5 a couple of times was play off meta and like I played a Venice run. And Venice was very unique in Civ 5.
Yeah, yeah.
But the cool thing about Venice was you basically substituted gold for production. You didn't really need production because you were just making so much fucking money all the time that you were just like buying raw units constantly. And stuff like that. So, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's something I'll definitely dip back into and see. Maybe maybe add a fluke run or something. But yeah,
Are you did you have any kind of interest in playing a second run after you were done?
I do. I just didn't know if it was like there were other things I wanted to do like this weekend.
Oh,
Um,
okay, fair enough. Yeah,
um,
I always wonder what a multiplayer would run.
no, that's
What
the other
run
thing I
would
was
look
gonna
like.
say is like I'd be super interested. Like I always have trouble with these games single player after like a couple of runs. It's just like it doesn't feel as compelling because like the AI just never feels like it stacks up to a person.
Yeah.
Especially if you've played with Danny, who,
I
who,
mean, even when we played some of these other games, right? Like the Civ 5 game with you and Charles, where you guys were trying to convert me to your religion.
yeah.
Like that was just I mean, that wasn't a game of optimization, but it was a game that was a lot of fun just from like the raw politics
Oh
of it.
yeah, yeah,
I I think our group Civ Stellaris and Crusader Kings games have been a lot of fun, generally
yeah,
speaking.
yeah, yeah.
The
Maybe
one
we'll,
I've always wanted to do though is Hearts of Iron. I would love to do a Hearts of Iron run.
interesting. Yeah, no, I just like never got into Hearts of Iron. Uh, I love to play this game
I
multiplayer just because like it's also like much more divisible. I think. Although I wonder how they do
yeah.
multiplayer in this. Do they do simulturns?
I imagine they have to do simulturns, right?
Yeah.
Which would make wars really interesting and like complicated, and I would hate it if I was not in the war. It would immediately just like throw the whole game into a dead halt because like wars obviously take so much more time and energy. Which is part of my frustration with these games in general is that it very rarely is as fun to play a peaceful civilization as to play a civilization at war. Just because your turns are longer, there's like more stuff going on. There's a lot at stake, right? Um, and I sort of wonder what I don't know. The Stellaris solution to that is just let you expand a lot. If you want to expand and micromanage 40 fucking colonies, feel free. That's what Stellaris tells
Yeah,
you,
I mean, Star Wars
which
Solaris is also real time, right? Like,
yeah,
you
that's
don't
true.
have to wait for anything. Um, and I've been looking like I
And Civ also does this with the archaeologists, right? Like like religion and archaeologists gives you these kind of non-combat units that you're running around doing shit on the map with.
yeah, yeah. I mean, there's a fair amount of exploration in this game for a while, right? Like, and you could do like the standard kind of Civ level of optimization, right? It's like stick around with your units to make sure everything's like placed, but like cities make sure everything's placed properly. So before we jump out of here, I do want to say that we didn't talk about the thing that I thought was the coolest about this, which is like you can build tall but without building new cities, right? Like the like we talked about the
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
attachment
yeah.
mechanic. So
Yeah, so the way that this works is you can found an outpost in a territory,
hmm,
right? And then you can attach that territory to a city of yours.
and part of this is like only one city or outpost is allowed per territory, which is like a game wide thing, right? It's not like in
Yeah.
Civ where you can like maybe like punch some cities close to each other, like to build things up in a different way. But which I think is like a really cool like that was like one of my favorite
Honestly, I
things
love
about
that.
it.
It
Yeah,
is one of the fundamental things, but I love it because one of the things I do in Civ is I get really anal about like where my like taking tiles, right? Because in Civ you're buying tiles a lot of the time,
right.
right? And this it just says no, the map is divisible into these chunks. You you can make a claim to that chunk, and then you can like really make it your territory by attaching it to a city. It is inside of your
Yeah,
city limits. I have no idea what this looks like because, as I said, I did not understand this mechanic until I had built like 6 cities. So I had 6 one territory cities kind of going up this peninsula, and then I was like, "Oh shit!" And what ended up happening is I took over another city that had an attachment to it, and I was like, "Oh, I'm such a fucking idiot. I could have been like whatever." I feel like the default way to play is to try and attach a territory to every one of your cities. Does that how does that sound to you?
Yeah, that's like there's some yeah, I think you probably don't want a lot of single cities, but there's like also a lot of like later game I did some like shenanigans where I like detached and reattached districts in different ways to like spread out them a little bit just because like the way everything got cornered, right? Because like I said, you can't devolve cities until like the medieval era at least, and that was always expensive. So like because there was an independent city that was like right next to one of my normal cities, I like reconfigured some stuff halfway through the game. Like there were a couple of Antarctic territories that I'd taken that was like they didn't make sense to like build into real cities, so I like attached them to one of my earlier cities and then took away some of its places and gave it to a different city, so rebalancing some. Yeah.
One thing I did is I detached and reattached to a new city once. I remember I took a city in one of the wars, and I had built up the attached territory into kind of this breadbasket, and I was like, "Oh, this is neat. I can unattach it from the city it's on, attach it to my new city, and give it this kind of like jump start, right? Because
Yeah.
like all of these districts are already built in there, which that was like mildly effective. To be honest, it was pretty bad. I had huge stability problems because like when you do that, you attaching costs stability and districts cost stability. So that was just a pain. But I don't know. I feel I like in the moment I thought I was being clever.
Yeah, no, I mean it's interesting. Like it's a neat set of systems.
It is definitely a neat set of systems. We should try and play multiplayer, I
I agree.
think, and then report back. But otherwise, I guess that's that. Do you what's like your final thoughts on Humankind?
I think it's a very cool evolution of like this like the kind of the very core I'm going to call it the civilization style subgenre of 4X
Okay.
games.
Yeah,
Um
I think so too. I think it may have I don't want to say rekindled my love because the second playthrough hasn't been as fun as the first one was, but that first one was electric.
yeah.
I was alive for the first time in my life. Not really. But the first time, like playing, there are sometimes I'll play one of these kinds of games. And I play a lot of games, obviously. Like I play a lot of prototypes for work and everything like that, where it is a slog, and it's like I'm playing an hour of this, and I just want to shoot my brains out, right? And I was afraid that it was going to fall into that category because of how sort of turned off I have been towards Civ games since kind of becoming a more avid Paradox player and becoming more avid like Total War player, etc. So I don't know. I'm definitely interested to see what a multiplayer version of this would look like.
I agree. I agree. All right, so how was your week?
Boy, how was my week? Man, I did a million things this week. I played some more Grime. I beat the Vulture in Grime. I spent 30 minutes. Did you do the Grieving Rock Giant? Did you ever do that fight?
No, so for people at home, I beat Grind this week, so that's my part of this. But I didn't
Okay.
attack anything that didn't attack me. I saw there were multiple endings, and I assumed that this was some weird sort of like Dark Souls thing where you have to do like something inscrutable. Turns out, no. Like to get to both endings, you just have to play it twice. You just
I
like
was
have to like.
gonna say there is. So did you just not have any like extra breath?
I
You
had
must have had one bar, right?
I had two. I had I didn't have the third one, and I had like 2/3 of the second one, right? Like because you get the
Okay, yeah.
yeah, so I had one full extra one and 2/3 of a second extra one.
Because I'm pretty sure there are 3 or 4 rock giants that are just hanging out.
Yeah,
That'll give their mini bosses. They'll give you breath. Yeah. Anyway, so I fought this one rock giant, which absolutely devastated me over and over again. I spent 30 minutes and I kept dying to this, and it was super funny. I was streaming at the time. This was actually for Buddy Gets Good.
yeah. I saw the
Um.
clip on the Twitter.
Oh yeah.
The
Yeah, and so I kept dying to this rock giant, and I was like, "Holy shit! How the fuck am I gonna beat the vulture?" And then I beat the vulture on my second try. I was like, "This is free compared to the rock giant." The rock giant did this thing that was really devious, which was the he does a leap where he jumps at you, right? And if you don't dodge, you just die. You can't parry. You just fucking kills you, right? Um, And there was one version of the leap that was very telegraphed, right? And there was another version of the leap where he does a stomp and then immediately jumps right after, right? And if you've ever fought any of the rock giants, they have a couple of different stomp attacks, right? One of them, it shoots a line that you have to jump over. Another one, it just makes the whole ground, bump, so you have to jump over it. And this boss is like precision targeted to prey on you if you have figured out these rock giant fights. Because what happens is you see the stomp coming, you go, oh, I need to jump. You stomp, you jump into the air, and then he leaps right on top of you and you fucking die. And I'm pretty sure I was supposed to fight this guy after I had defeated the Vulture and gotten the air dash. Because if I had the air dash, it would have been fine.
Hmm.
He would have left, I would have air dashed, I would have had my iframes, it would have not been a big deal, right? But I just kept falling into this trap over and over and over again. And I couldn't, for the life of me, differentiate the stomps, really. And so I eventually just kind of like got to this point where I was trying really hard to not to take essentially the ground damage, because the ground damage you can absorb a little bit of it, right? I was trying really hard to take the ground damage and be dodging so that I just never got left on. Eventually I got it. And then we did the Vulture fight, which is a very fun fight. I actually like that fight quite a lot.
Hmm.
Um and um and I beat that one pretty almost, I don't want to say effortlessly, but I beat that in like 2 tries. My build at the time I think was the Urglaive and the Obelisk Fist. Everybody says the Urglaive is really good. It's like overpowered, people think. Um but my thing with fighting both the Rock Giant and the Vulture is that the Obelisk Fist aerial did a lot more damage than the Urglaive aerial. So I was doing a lot of like jump, punch with the Obelisk Fist, drop down kind of thing. And then anytime I was fighting on the ground, I was using the Urglaive. So that was my grind progress over the course of the week. What about you?
Yeah, so like I said, I beat the game. I finished it basically with the unfinished slab, just because, like, I tried for a second to like do like there's like the resolve lantern, and then you get this drill, which is a resolve strength weapon. I was like, oh, this is neat. It's like it'll double your burst stacks. I'm like, this is really cool. I'm gonna give it a shot, and I like stacked some things on it, and then I went to use the drill, and like I tried for like half an hour to get it to work, and I would just like get like beat the shit out of me every time I tried to do the special move. So and, like it does, I never got it to I never got it to actually like go off. And this was against like slow moving enemies too. So
Did you ever find the jaw axe?
yes, which I realized right before I did the final boss fight was like slightly better statted. Um,
Okay. Yeah, that was something we also spent time on in the stream doing, was getting the jaw axe, because I told the stream that I was dedicated to my strength build, and they're like, okay, fine, but please put away these fucking obelisk fists.
yeah, no. So like the draw axe I believe is BC for strength resolve, and the unfinished slab is BEE. And so like the jaw axe was like slightly better, but I realized this like literally right before the final boss fight. I'm like, you know what, screw this. I'm gonna like use my old reliable for this
Yeah,
fight.
still
Yeah,
haven't found it. You told me a little bit of where it was, but I still wasn't able to find it on stream the other day. I don't really look that hard, but
yeah.
I went back exploring because it's in Lithic, you said,
I
right?
think so, right? Because it's
Yeah, I
made
went
of
back.
like unfinished rockmen, right?
Okay, yeah, I went back looking for it, and I just could not figure out where it was, because I was excited. I was excited to see
Yeah.
the mango special, right? Um,
I
but
mean,
yeah, so what are your ending thoughts on Grime? Do you have any complex thoughts?
so I think it's really neat. It's a little rough around the edges, right? Like it's like one dude who made this, right? Right?
Yeah, so it's a team of four. One guy who did most of it, Yarden. Then there's Jonathan, who is the technical artist, like he did all like the lighting and stuff like that. Then there is Alex and Sean, who do audio. So there's five, and then there's Theodore, who does programming.
Okay. Yeah, and I appreciated what it was going for. Um and I had a lot of fun with it, right? Like I beat it all the way, but like part of what it made me feel is like, man, I'd really like to go back and play Hollow Knight again.
Yeah,
And I think part of that is just like this game wants to be a little bit more like Dark Souls than Hollow Knight does, and I appreciate I like for the Metroidvania part of it, I like the lots of movement, and it's a little stiff in Prime. I think on purpose, right? Like it's trying to be a little bit more stiff.
Yep.
on purpose, which is fine. It's just not as much to my preference as Hollow Knight was, but it was very ambitious, very fun. Um, Not sure I quite understand what like the deeper stories or themes were supposed to be, because like part of the reason I didn't fight the rock giants is because like I felt pretty bad for them, right? They're
Mm-hmm.
like, it's like why would I beat them up? They're nice guys, right? Like, and there was a couple of times where like I got like text options. It's like, on the servant's path. I don't know if you've gotten there yet, but like what like you're next to one of the save rocks, and like the guy's like, how did you do that? Show me how to do it. And the options are like ignore him or show him. I hit show him, and you just like you punch him in the face and he dies. Like,
What I do know is that they're big D&D players,
okay,
and that and I feel like that kind of underwrites the story a little bit, right? Like at the end of the day, I don't think that like the story of Grime is like it's not like Disco
yeah,
Elysium, right? Like
yeah,
it's not incredibly complex. It's pretty straightforward, but I feel like it is what it is. I like kind of like the world building and like lore of it more
oh
than
yeah,
anything else.
right, and that is very Souls like, right? Like kind of like
Yeah,
hinted at.
yeah. I mean that. Yeah, absolutely. I feel that 100%.
Obviously the big thing at the end is like quite a bit of a twist, and I'm not so sure. Like it feels like a large thing just kind of like dump on you. I don't know how familiar you are with it.
I am familiar with the ending, so
Okay, I
no
won't.
spoilers, I guess, for the chat. But
Yeah, yeah,
I do know what you're referencing.
yeah. Um, I was kind of like, oh, okay, that's a lot to take in like the last 5 seconds of this game. But it was neat. And there were some hints to it, right? Like I remember when you are at the world pillar and you finally unlock that elevator in the world pillar. I'm like, huh, that looks like a thing that like implies something about what this world is. I'm trying to very hard to dodge around like anything that's like super obvious, right?
Yeah, I mean, I know that we have chat in in chat. I want you all to play Grime and enjoy it, but I definitely don't want you to spoil it.
Yeah,
Not
I
no
don't.
spoilers was a big thing for us when we were talking about the game and like marketing and everything like that. We didn't want to get anything spoiled. So much so that the patch notes have spoiler
Oh yeah,
tags on them.
which I appreciate. I definitely appreciate.
Yeah.
Uh, it just seems like that, like some of that stuff, doesn't tie in super well with like some of like the I'm gonna call like the civilizational level stuff that happens with like the rock people. I think as you go on, um,
Sure.
yeah. But it's a cool setting with a lot of cool stuff and a lot of cool designs. Um, and it was fun. Um, it was it was we'll probably have to talk about this off cast, but like there's some interest. Like it's a cool game, a little bit disparate. Like I hate to draw this comparison again, but Hollow Knight I think was a little bit more coherent. Um,
Mm.
but it also tried to do like I don't know. It went very hard on its lore in a particular way that this game goes a little bit disparate. There's also some things that I still didn't get about like just like mechanic wise for this game, right? Like there are these items that are inside of like little um like they're like dash through points, but like they
Yeah,
don't have
did you fight the misbegotten amalgam? Do you know what that have
I
you
know
heard of
what
that?
that is and I haven't fought it.
Okay.
Um
It is I
oh, it
hate
gives
to
you a
spoil this for
power?
you. It
Yeah.
gives you a power. That is an optional boss, and it is
Yeah.
because of that reason, right? Like you
Yeah.
will never block your progression, but you can suck the items out of those
Okay. Okay,
spots.
yeah, that makes sense. I never figured out how to get there, and I don't like there were some weird things I suspect are like interpatch issues, right? Like there's like a like after the first patch where he added a new nerve ending.
Mhm.
Like I went to go back to the nerve ending that I went through, and it dumped me out in the bottom of features layer near a shop, and I couldn't figure out how to get back to that shop. So I also didn't look particularly. I didn't look particularly hard, um,
I feel
because
that.
yeah, like because the game doesn't let you move super quick. Like it feels a little bit like a chore to like go re-explore things. Like he in one of the patches, he said there's like a weapon that I put back that like accidentally never got put back in to the features. There, I was like, I don't care enough to go back for it, right? Um,
Yeah, fast travel is a big issue that we've been talking about, especially because like on one end you want it's complicated, right? Because
yeah.
like
Oh yeah.
part of the fun is moving from place to place. Like so for instance, something that I remember talking about when Skyrim was around was how I think the best way to play Skyrim is to fast travel to cities. Like you have to walk a certain amount of it, right? There are too many sort of fast travelable points in Skyrim, and it removes a lot of the fun out of the game if you just like fast travel the dungeon, clear dungeon, exit dungeon, fast travel to your house or whatever, right? Like um and I feel like that ethos sort of is a little bit there in Grime, but it's like on the other end of the spectrum, right? Where there are sort of, you only unlock fast travel at the end of the game, and there's, not a ton of points to, to do it or whatever. Um,
Yeah,
so I do know that it's something that we've been talking about. I don't know what changes are in mind, but there probably are going to be some changes coming up.
sure. And like I think the nerve roots are super thematic,
Hmm.
that are cool, but like I don't think there are so many of those kind of like, you know, I'm gonna by analogy call the bonfires, right? Like that you couldn't do the bonfire warp without it destroying the game.
Yeah,
Um,
sure.
but that's just my 2 cents. Especially because like it doesn't feel like there's a lot of reason to. This is something that did get to me a little bit. There are like things you can't access rather until you go back. So there's like standard Metroidvania stuff, but
Yeah.
it felt like a lot of the little things were not worth going back for. Right, the one that's most clear in my mind is there's like a thing that you can get in the I don't want to spoil anything, in the area right before the penultimate boss,
Okay.
right? Um, thing I was talking to you about. Like there's the thing that's like, as soon as you finish it, you get a power like, oh, I once I can go back there, I can go grab that, right? Because like it's very obviously out of reach, and then like the power you get lets you go back to it. And so I went back to it, and it was like a shard of breath or whatever, like the thing that like fills the bar. I was like, this was not worth me like caring about going back to, and I think that's just like a hard thing to
Yeah, I mean,
balance.
there's a bunch of weapons that are sort of like locked like that. Like you
Yeah,
can't get the jaw axe until you defeat the vulture, I'm pretty sure.
right,
But
yes,
I definitely feel that. I think that it is a complicated cuz like, I think kind of the bedrock of a lot of games is, do content get rewards, right?
right,
And when the game is functioning like I talk about this in WoW terms, but it applies to Grime, right? When the game is functioning correctly, right? Doing the content is fun, and getting the rewards is also fun, right? It is fun to fight a boss and kill it, and it is fun to pick up a good item out of the boss, right? But it's pretty easy for those two to sort of like be out of whack, and you can get in these positions where like the rewards just don't feel worth it, right? Or the content feels like a chore, right? I think a lot of people complaining about Torghast in 9.0 were complaining about that content was unfun, but the reward, my legendary dust, was important. So the reward felt good, but the content to get there didn't, right? And I think Grime is sort of in a similar situation where it's like, I want to be rewarded for thinking to go back and to find these things or whatever, but those consumables are not, that's not really a reward I
yeah.
care about. I care about weapons, I care about armor, maybe, right? um
I
but I
think
don't
this is
care about 5 nails or whatever.
right. I think this is maybe a genre clash, right? Because like the thing that enables that like that level of going back and exploring is the Metroidvania part,
Yeah,
whereas like the Souls like part is like kind of like speaks to like the not a lot of stuff to get. Right, if they're like in say in Dark
yeah,
Souls, there are a couple of things to get in different places, but like you know, I mean, part of it is like you can in Dark Souls you can give a Souls item and that's worth something, right? Like especially because everything's at risk and it's not at risk in this game.
yeah.
Um, and like the consumables are kind of like, eh, especially because you can't. This is a very Dark Souls enabled thing. You can't rely on consumables because you might, if you lose enough times, you won't have any more consumables, right? Um,
Yeah,
uh,
I also am in that position of like, use a health potion. What if I need it later? You have 85.
y-
I have 185 actually, but I don't want to use them, right?
yeah,
Like, I don't
exactly.
know how to strike that back. Like, this happens to me. I don't know. So with like the augment runes in WoW or whatever, like there will be sometimes where I do use them and sometimes that I don't, and it's because like depending on the amount of them that I have, I feel like they are a resource that I can burn, right? Like if I have right now I have like 80 of them, and so I'm using them on world quests, right? Like I go into Korthia and I pop an augment rune because they're nothing essentially at that point, right? But there are also times when like we're doing progression in Sire to Dathrius, and I stop using these augment runes because I'm like, really what I care about is Mythic Plus, and I want to keep these augment runes for my Mythic Plus parses, like, you know.
So funnily enough, for me, the other side of that is like, my augment rooms have been a lot just like a source of income, right? Because like I have like regularly have like close to 120, and I'll sell down to 80, but the prices have been so cratered on them. That's like, well, I don't want to sell them because they're not worth, it's not worth selling them at this point.
I didn't know that the prices have created on them that bad. That
Yeah,
sucks.
they're
My
like
new thing,
below 100 gold at this point.
I've been making a lot of gold on the legendary market again because what I didn't realize, I was like, I'm gonna sell these 262 legendaries. Fuck yeah. But like people, people don't people buy like one 262 legendary, right? Because you have to farm a lot of soul cinders in order to get that. But I realized, I was like, wait, but what if I just start selling 235s again? And the thing is people are overflowing in Soul Ash now because Torghast gives a bunch of extra Soul Ash. So I've just been selling these 235 legendaries like constantly, like fucking hotcakes, because people I think are trying out these other legendaries, or like legendaries for other specs or whatever, because Soul Ash is so plentiful. I'm sitting on like 15,000 Soul Ash. I'm just like, what the fuck am I ever gonna do with this? Like,
Yeah, no. I mean, I totally get that. I've been farming soul cinders to upgrade my touch of death ring because I spent my first set on the raid legendary, my feline stomp belt, which I really like, but like,
oh yeah, you got the Feline Stomp Belt. Neat.
yeah.
That is interesting. Is that like Biss, or is that just because you wanted it?
It is best for Night Fae, which is not necessarily the best covenant
Okay.
for monks. But if you are Night Fae, then it's the best legendary for Night Fae or for monks.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
Um,
That makes sense.
Otherwise, I think it's still Summoner Invoker's Delight or whatever for the other one. It depends. Uh,
Yeah, I mean, people are really mad about like the systems or whatever of 9.1, and I'm sort of on that side. I don't like Shards of Domination overall. I like Shards of Domination, and once it sort of solves the Shriekwing problem of just like the boss in the raid that you've killed a million times and has no loot for nobody, and it just feels like a hassle. Like, at least killing Terragru, I'm gonna get
Shard or
soul
this,
embers
yeah,
or
whatever that's
whatever.
called. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, to upgrade my shards and shit like that. But ultimately, the thing I really hate about shards is how unintuitive the gearing becomes. Because it's like, okay, well, I have a two, like, let's say I pull a 252 thing out of the vault, but I have 220 gloves that have a shard slot. It's like, is that worth it? I don't know. Like, I hate
Yeah,
that. That's a very frustrating feeling.
you also have to kind of like right. Like I am missing a chest with a domination socket, right? But like, and that's the only one I'm missing. And like, theoretically, I should be pursuing one of those. And like, if one comes up, but like, I'm not gonna plot a DPS thing into it. So like, there's maybe it's not worth actually replacing, right? Like, um,
Yeah, like, because it's also the set bonuses are on specific pieces. Like, I have all of the frost shards and frost shoulders. I actually just now I have a chest piece, so I can now do the blood one too. And it's like, should I do the frost one? Do I do the blood set bonus or whatever? Like, I just like, those questions are very complicated. We know this is like a one patch thing, and you know, I don't know. It's something I've been thinking about a lot recently. Is somebody linked to an old Ghost Crawler? Do you remember Ghost Crawler, like the original WoW lead?
yes. Did
He
he
was
move
like, he
to
was the WoW
Riot?
lead from like Burning. Yeah, he's at Riot now. He's doing the Riot MMO. There was the Burning. He was like, I think he became game director in Burning Crusade. It was through all of Wrath, Kata, Mists, and then I think he left at the end of Mists, or maybe in the beginning of Warlord, something somewhere along those lines. Um, he answered a question a couple of years ago that was about like unsubbing. He was like, if I'm not happy with the game's systems, should I unsub as a way to tell the developers that I don't like their systems? And he said, the reason that people unsub from the game is, I don't have enough time for this. I need, like, I want to go back to school. I want to raise a family, I want to do whatever. And my friends are playing something else. And those two reasons dwarf everything so completely that no designer would ever look at that as feedback, or like ever look at the feedback of, I don't like these systems, as a core reason for why people unsub, right? Like it's just so monumentally like low on the list. But he talks about how what designers do pay attention to is like the overall trend, right? So a designer doesn't really care about an individual unsub or even a spike of unsubs. They care about a declining trend of people unsubbing and figuring out why. And something that he said, which I thought was really interesting, he was like, designers have two, like developers have two thoughts here. One thought is our players are bored. We need to innovate. We need to be bold. You know, like this is the time for
Time to bring back
dir-
Arthas.
yeah, well, no. So, and then the other one is we're too far from our roots. We need to go back to basics.
Return
You
to
know, people are
tradition.
sick of this. Like, yeah, exactly. This new shit. And in the post, he says that he's like, almost always I found the traditionalists are wrong, which is really interesting in the modern state of WoW, where players are very obviously saying, I want a simpler experience, right? I want to return to stuff like class sets, for instance. Um, and I do think class sets are a good idea, and the experiment of getting rid of them has ultimately failed or whatever else, right? But it's just like that's a really interesting kind of thought. Like, at what point is the innovation of something like Shards of Domination, which is a very new system? We've never seen this kind of thing before, and it is legitimately new and interesting, right? But I also think that it's pretty bad.
Yeah, I don't know if I think it's bad. Like, I think the only way you can make this interesting is if you like make it an actual option, right? Because it's effectively a class set, but by like role, right? Like, and without
Yeah.
anything interesting visually to go along with it, right? The class sets at least like look neat, right?
Mhm.
Like, um,
Or see, this is the my other core thing. It also affects my rotation, right? My rotation does not change if I put on the blood set, if I put on the frost set, if I put on the unholy set, right? Fundamentally, my rotation is the exact same, so it doesn't actually influence my gameplay at all. But one of the things that I always looked forward to when it came to a class set, right, is you look at your 2 and your 4 set bonus, you go, oh my god, now when I use Blade Storm, I'm gonna use execute on everybody around me or something, you know, like something crazy powerful. And that's something to be excited for. And it's something to build around. It's something to, you know, sort of that will like affect or change the way that you're playing, right? And I think that that's a big thing that is lacking in
really,
the
because I actually think the legendaries are pretty good at that, right?
so I
Like,
think the legendaries are good at that. Yes. So I do agree with you. I think the legendaries are good at that. But so the problem with going from 9.0 to 9.1, right? Imagine a world
okay,
where I'm going from 9.0 and in 9.1 I get to equip a second legendary. Or maybe I get like a second legendary, like maybe the Covenant legendary doesn't count towards your limit. So everybody gets to equip the Covenant legendary, for instance, or something kind of along those lines, right? Then we would be in a sim or maybe they get rid of all of the old conduits and they say, okay, for season 2, here's a bunch of new conduits to slot into your soul binds or whatever, right? But the thing is, my Bis legendary didn't change, right?
right, okay,
And the only new thing I'm getting are the soulbind traits, which are legitimately like interesting and do change up my gameplay a little bit, right? But they're class agnostic. They don't interact with any of my abilities except for in kind of like the unintuitive way of like, oh, getting a bunch of extra mastery makes my blade storm hit harder, right? Like that kind of thing. And so really I'm playing the exact same class in 9.1 as I am playing him in 9.0, right? Like I just my I am in the exact same spot, right? Um, and I feel like that's the big failing of Shards of Domination, right? If a class set is there instead of Shards of Domination, or you can equip a second legendary, or they rotate out season 1 conduits and introduce a bunch of new conduits, right? There's something to shake up that rotation, that gameplay a little bit for me, and make it so that I'm not just like building the same thing over and over again. I think part of this is also made worse by being a kind of Mythic Plus player first. Because in Mythic Plus, I'm only ever getting 26 item level upgrades of gear that I've already farmed, right? And the worst part about that gear, and I will never not be fucking salty about this, the worst part about that gear is it is the same appearance as Mythic Zero shit, right? Like I'm not even getting the cool Sanctum of Domination appearances, right? Or like the PvP appearances, right? Like that, those two share the set, the seasonal set. Mythic Plus is not. Mythic Plus, I'm getting the exact same shit, and all I've done is increase the item level by 26 points, which, you know, to be fair, does feel good. it was a great reward to get my bis trinket and be able to pump it with all of this valor, and now I have an extra 20 item levels on a trinket that I had in 9.0. I like that trinket. That trinket's a lot of fun. It does big damage. It gives me lots of crit. That's nice, right? But ultimately, like, there isn't anything that is like shaking up my gameplay, and I'm kind of feeling like, I don't know, weirdly stagnant, I guess, in terms of where and what I'm playing.
That's fair. I got lucky. Because not only did I switch out, not only did my best legendary switch, in order to optimize on that, I had to switch one of my talents. I usually rolled Chi Wave, and I went to Chi Blast.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
because Chi Blast hit, so the Night Fae legendary doubles your chance of resetting Phaline Stomp,
Mhm.
and Chi Blast like basically guarantees a reset because like it'll hit like the enemy and like all of your allies in the raid, right? So like it's like enough.
Oh, interesting.
So I had to learn how to use that. So like that's freshened it up for me. Like now I can do this level of mastery, right? Like so yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, part of, my hope is that whenever 9.2 comes around, there's going to be like cool new shit to look into. I have very high hopes, because I think, I don't know. I kind of get the sense that 9.1, because like it was delayed so much, it feels like a point 0.2 patch when like, even though it is a point 0.1 patch, like the difference between 8.0 and 8.1 also was not that big, but 8.1 came out 4 months after 8.0, so it was just like much quicker on the turnaround, right? And then 8.2 comes out and introduces new systems that radically redefine like the way that I was playing
Mm.
at the time. And famously, we talked about this in the podcast then, like I think 8.2 is when Battle for Azeroth got like legitimately good and like fun. And so I don't know. We'll see. We'll
Have
see if 9.2 does that.
Have you heard the insane rumors that I am almost positive are false?
Oh my god! So first of all, I am legitimately 1,000,000% positive they're fault. Like the renaming
Yeah,
Blizzard to
it's
Insight.
like yeah, and like
Yeah, we're canceling the Overwatch League.
canceling Overwatch 2, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah. Oh my god.
uh,
I you know I have been dealing with these leaks for so long that it is hard to convince me that a leak is real. But I guess my thing about any of these leaks is no one ever has that visibility. Speak as listen, as a low level game design person, like a person who's been working in game development for 8 years, almost a decade at this point, right? Um, the only person who knows the top level shit of what's going on in all of these different projects is like the fucking CEO.
right.
And like,
Yeah, like
unless J. Allen Brack made a fucking 4chan account, I don't think that he's gonna leak that. I just
that would
like,
be great
holy
if
fuck.
JL and Brack is just like mad. He's like, they made me resign, so I'm gonna leak all this shit.
Oh
Like,
my god. Could you imagine?
oh
I don't
man.
know.
Um,
Yeah, I mean,
well,
have you been paying any attention to this lawsuit stuff? Are you done with the like?
so frankly, it hasn't popped up in what is it, Hoglaw's series, Virtual
Yeah,
Legality.
yeah.
So
I haven't
like,
watched it.
yeah, no, so I haven't been paying attention. I don't think there's been a lot of movement either, right? Like,
Yeah,
cause
I
like,
also don't think that there's been a lot of movement. So yeah.
um,
The one new thing that I saw is they're hiring a lot of extra people for the Warcraft team, which I think is good. Obviously,
yeah.
they opened up like 20 positions, which is the kind of thing, people who are. I think there are a lot of people who are invested in Blizz bad, WoW bad, like, and want like the game to fail or whatever. But I feel like if you're looking for signs of the apocalypse, hiring a bunch of people to the team is probably not one of
Oh yeah,
those, right?
I was gonna say one of these like fake rumors was that like 9.3 was gonna release and that was gonna be it for WoW. It's like you don't hire 20 people if that's gonna happen,
Yeah, I
right?
mean,
Like,
God, come on, right? Like, oh God, that's funny.
yeah.
Man, I just want good. The old leaks used to be more fun because they were like expansion leaks and like what's gonna happen next in the story. And people put a lot of time into making very good fake leaks, But hey, I don't know. What are you gonna do?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um.
I guess that's about it.
Yeah. Did you do anything else this week?
I did not. I watched a lot of Scrubs. I've been watching Scrubs recently.
Oh, I I used to
For
love that show.
I also love that show, and the Zach Braff went to my high school, So I feel
Oh,
I'm
oh, that makes
certain.
sense. That's right. He's from the Garden State. Yeah.
Yeah. And I watched his TV production movie, which was like this mythical thing because he was obviously famous at the time. Like he was in Scrubs at the time that we were all in high school, and getting to watch the movie that the actor made when he was a student like me, and it's just like any other, it was terrible. They're all bad.
No, very similar thing happened. I think it was the directors of Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle went to my high school. And,
No way!
and like,
That actually makes so much sense because that movie is so full of like really esoteric New Jersey
yeah,
references.
yeah, no,
It's
exactly.
also a rare movie that I think gets the geography right. I don't when we complain, I complained about this with Captain Marvel, right? Like they filmed Captain Marvel in the South Bay where I live, so I could see when they teleported streets, or whatever else, right? But I feel like Harold and Kumar, you really could legitimately chart their path through New Jersey and it would be
Yeah,
relatively accurate, right?
yeah, yeah. No, I was thinking the same thing happened with Ant-Man,
Yeah.
in San Francisco, like the same type of vibes. But yeah, no, I think you're right about Harold and Kumar. Um, I haven't actually seen it, but apparently the same thing happens with our campus on the social network, which is
Oh yeah.
more forgivable because it's not actually set on our campus; it was just filmed there.
Yeah, well,
Right,
because Harvard won't let you film on
right.
Harvard, so they use Hopkins to,
Yeah, Hopkins doesn't care. And it looks like Harvard, right? Like,
it's a bunch of brick buildings in a
yeah,
quad,
yeah,
like.
yeah.
Okay, so we're over time,
Oh
but
yeah, yeah, yeah.
there we
No,
go.
absolutely. The only thing I want to
Um,
mention before we get out of here is I
okay.
also finished Dune Messiah, and I'm on to Children of Dune,
Oh
and
boy, here we go.
and I think like I think I agree with the people who say that Dune's the best one, and it just kind of goes downhill from there. It doesn't mean I think it's bad, but I just like I've got some deeper thoughts, and I'll hold them until I guess I'm done. I'm reading or I'm listening. I'm listening to all these on tape to Children of Dune, um, and I might have some more thoughts at the end of it. It's a weird series, but it's good. Yeah, like I said, I definitely recommend Dune to anyone. And if you like it, I'd say move on to the other books. But
Okay, sounds cool.
yeah. Did you want to say something? Do you have anything you want to promote before we get out of here?
I do have one thing I want to promote. First of all, if anybody cares, I'm giving a talk at DevCom this week at 9 a.m. Pacific on Wednesday. DevCom is, famous. It's kind of like Gamescom, but it's like the big GDC equivalent, essentially in the EU. So that's cool. I am also launching a game that exact same day. It's called Behind the Frame. It's great. It is sort of like an adventure puzzle game, a lot like Mutazione, but shorter and more. I don't know. It's a very like laid back painter movie. People think about People have compared it a lot to Pixar and Studio Ghibli, which I think are both
Ooh,
very apt comparisons, I guess. So if that interests you, it's available on Steam on Wednesday.
very cool.
And yeah, that's it. That's
What's the
what I'm
name of that
looking
game
for.
again?
Behind the Frame.
Behind the Frame. All right. Well, if you'd like to email us and tell us what you thought about anything you talked about on this podcast, like Humankind or Grime or anything or World of Warcraft, because that's what we perpetually talk about is World of Warcraft. You can email us at dirtplaygames@gmail.com or podcast@dirtplaygames.com. Rate, review us on iTunes and all the other places. You can follow us at twitch.tv/dirtplaygames. These go out live. We should probably talk about beating Sylvanas next time, since we
Ooh.
didn't talk
Oh,
about
that's
that.
true. Well, we haven't done the whole raid. Maybe when we get ATC, we'll do another Sanctum episode. Do you want to
Yeah,
do? We can do a Sanctum episode. I don't know. We'll have to think about it.
yeah, we'll probably do a Sanctum episode. That's
We
probably
should
the
do
better
we should
call.
do a couple things. We should do a wish list. We did a wish list episode that I don't remember what ended up being on our wish list
Neither do I.
or if it got met. But we should do a wish list episode before 9.2. Maybe
Yeah,
before 9.1.5, which is theoretically around the corner.
yeah. Maybe we should go back and listen to our wish list episode and see how that panned
Yeah,
out.
and see
We,
how
we
see how
probably
it
should have
panned
done
out.
that already, because that
We really should have. That would have been a great like segment, right?
Yeah. But yeah, I think that's everything I have. Unless you have anything else. As the train goes by again. There's been 3 trains this episode, which is I think a record.
It's a rec-
Well, in that case, until next time, dear listeners.
Until next time, loyal listeners.